Robert, make sure he knows it's you because yours says Gladys.
Oh, yeah. By the way, I'm Robert.
Yeah, I see that, Robert. I see that it's a different name, but Corbett is your name. So I got that that's you.
Yep.
St. Dunstan. Millbrae. Davina, are you there?
Yes, hi.
Hi. I had an email that I sent a little earlier, and do you go by a different name by any chance? Is your name by any chance?
It's under Hong.
That's what I thought. So it's Hua Hong, right?
Yeah. Hong Hua. Yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay. You're good then. I've got you covered.
Thank you.
Yep. That's what I thought. Great. So we have 17 participants, and we now have probably more. 18 now. We're going up. So all of you received my 2 emails this afternoon? Great. Well, let's just start off by asking you how you've all been doing under the stay-at-home order. I hope that you're all okay. I know that it's a lot of work and it's certainly different, but is everyone doing all right? Yep, I'm sure you do.
Yeah, same. I've taken up like a whole bunch of different things.
Yeah, I'm doing good too.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. Wow, that's something. That is something.
How have you been?
I've been okay. My days have been going, at first they were going very slowly, and now they're going very, very quickly. For example, I saw the clock at 9 o'clock this morning, and then I was doing a bunch of things, and before I knew it, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I said, how did that happen? So it's just very odd, but it is a very odd situation, you know. So we just have to do the best. But you have to balance things out. You've got to get out a little bit, but be careful. And there's just a lot of that going on. Well, okay, so let's get started. In the interest of time and out of respect to those of you who are here, there are 22 of you here. There are 30 enrolled in the class. So today I did basically, I went through and a little bit about my process. I went through and looked at, I matched all of the group projects and the names that you submitted against the roll sheet. And I came up with everyone except for 5 people. And one of them has been solved. So now I have 4 people that I need to contact me because I'm not sure whether those individuals are actually in the, are doing a group project or a term paper. So I want to check in with them to make sure that they are what they are doing, so we know what is going on. So that's the first thing I wanted to check in about. So that's been done. You all saw in the email today that we will start the group projects next week, and that we will just what'll happen, just to give you a sense, is that we will start right at 6:30. We'll do the 3 group presentations, and next week followed by a presentation by Marianne, who's doing a paper on the 1934 general strike. And then we'll be done with that evening, and then we'll move on to the next week, of which we'll have 3 presentations that are done, that will be done. And then there are 2 papers that I have so far. We'll have Robert Corbett, and then we will also have Yichen Ma, who Yichen is writing about the Chinese settlements in their influence in San Francisco, and Robert is writing a paper on the Donner Party. And so those will be interesting papers. And just to be super clear, and I just want to check in and manage all of our expectations, that the group projects are going to be roughly 30 to 40 minutes. Does that match what you have thought about 30 to 40 minutes?
Yeah, I think that should be fine. Okay.
So if not, let me know. But if we go a little bit over, that's going to be quite all right. We go a little bit over that, but general, then we're 35 to 45 minutes, let's just say. And then the papers, I'm only requiring of those doing term papers to do like a 10 to 12 minute presentation. And I will be writing out what I expect from those. But essentially, it's basically the topic you chose, like the important points that you learned from the paper, and historical facts and analysis that you'd like to share with the class that you think will be interesting to them, period. The projects are going to be, as I said, between 35 and 45 minutes. And I am taking one thing away in terms of what I expect, but I'm adding one thing in. And so you know this from my communication with you earlier, that one of the things that I'm taking away and not expecting you to do, because I think it would be just too difficult given the platform of Zoom, is that I am asking you to please not worry about necessarily class involvement. That's going to be very, very difficult with this Zoom and with all of us on Zoom together. So I'm going to forgive that part of the project. That criterion will be forgiven. In other words, I don't expect, and you will not be graded down for not including any component that has to do with class participation. So I'll be good with that. One of the things that has struck me, and I warned you all about this from Jump Street, is that I had asked, I begged, I entreated you, I implored that everyone do a really bang-up job regarding the group project. And that I didn't want any drama. That's what I recall saying. And so what I want from you that will be helpful in my analysis in the end is after you have given your group project presentation, what I would like is for each group, I just want 1 page per group, and I would like the list of the names of the participants along with how they participated in the group project to bring it to fruition. In other words, I want to know what people have done. And I'm just going to be very honest with you. I've received about 4 calls this week. There were group members at their wits' end about the fact that there have been some committee members or some group members who have not pulled their weight regarding the group project. And so there have been some issues with that. And so I would like to tease that out somehow. And so what I am asking is that, and we'll figure this out, we will ask will like one person from each group to make sure that they collect from the other members of the group information about what they did on the group project to bring it to fruition. In other words, to finish it up. How did you participate to help your group out in order to do this presentation? Okay, that's one. The other thing I want to tell you is that you're going to email me that sheet of paper, and I want everyone in your group copied on that so there's transparency. Does that make sense? Yes? No?
Yes.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
So that's great. So that's what I liked. That's what I would like from you, and that I expect that you'll do a really good job with that. So I want to just be super clear about that, just so we all know what is going on and that sort of thing. Okay, I'm going to move to another area, but so hang on for just a second. Okay. All right. Excuse me. I jostle myself here. Be right back.
All right. Everybody staying safe? Might as well have a conversation instead of being quiet. Everybody good?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Has anyone else gained the quarantine 15 or not?
Hell yeah.
Okay.
Oh my god, Gwen, yes I have. I'm literally eating ice cream out of the tub right now because
Thank you.
I took like an hour to go shopping today and it took so much out of me. Yep,
Good.
me too.
I feel that.
I agree.
I don't know why I thought quarantine would be a good time to try and stay fit, but it didn't happen.
No, it was not. Yeah. Yeah. No.
Okay, I'm back. For better or for worse, I am back. So I hope that's clear with everyone that I have sent you 2 emails today. One email was about what's going on in the class, what the schedule is, and the other email was a film analysis that you'll be doing. You have over the next 48 hours, 9 hours to do, which is a 17-minute film. And again, you can start to watch that as of 7:30 tonight, and you have until Friday, May 1st at 11:59 p.m. to turn that in. Just to give you a sense, there were only 21 people who submitted the last assignment. And so I would urge you to please do that. There are 27 of you right now online here. And it's really critically important that you do these assignments on Canvas, okay? So just to let you know, and I just feel compelled to tell you about the kind of housekeeping here. So you know what's up for tonight. We'll talk a little bit about tonight. And so tonight I would like to have a discussion with you. I'd like to make some references to some things in the course. And then I would like you we'll be done by 7:30, but then you're to see the film that's on your Canvas. It's also been sent, as you know, as a link on your email. And you're to watch that. And then there's a little assignment where you're going to write 350 to 400 words on Canvas and submit that by Friday night. So that'll be done. There's yet one more 5-point assignment that we'll be doing. I'll give you a preview of coming attractions. What it is basically kind of a 30,000-foot view of the course and of the content. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to basically write about the really salient points, the important points, according to you, in California history, not only historical phenomena, but also historical characters. So, what do you think about that? You'll see a film tonight, which might help you write that post or answer that post as well. And it's basically kind of the ups and downs of California history. That's what you'll see tonight in that film. So that'll take care of those things. And then there's going to be starting next week, as I said, we will go ahead and we'll do the presentations and a paper presentation. And then the next week, presentations. And then the following week is the very last day of class. And it has to do with the quiz. And I am going to give you as much context for that as possible. And so what I'll do is I'll make sure that, this isn't just, we've got to kind of frame that and think about that and to think about, well, what's on that quiz? What is the material that should be reviewed by you so you do well on the quiz? And we will definitely go over that, certainly by next week. I'll be consulting with a few of you to make sure that my notes are right. And it's a way of me checking myself as we go through that. And then I will either send you an email or verbally talk with you next week in between presentations or at the end of the evening about that we'll have 2 weeks to study for that and then you'll just do it. It'll be very much like the first midterm, except this time I'm a little more expert, so I won't be making the mistakes that I made before, for which I apologize. I couldn't believe it. Some of those answers that I gave on the key were wrong, just because of the format was pretty odd. So I cleaned that up, but that will not happen again. So I'm sorry about that. And I did correct that. So that's what we're up to, really. And I hope that sounds good to you. But I'm going to stop because I've given a lot of information. And I'm going to ask if you have any comments or questions, anything I can clarify about how we're going to finish this course off over the next 3 weeks.
I have a question.
Okay. So, okay, go ahead, please.
I guess I'll go first. I have a question about the paper that we have to submit, about all the work we're doing by, what is it called? Categorize it by who did what. Do we have to turn in any note cards or anything that we wrote for the presentation as well? Or do we just stop what we did?
What I would like, actually, and I thought about this, and I don't know whether I think you can do this. I would imagine that all of you will be doing a PowerPoint of some sort, except for maybe the paper presentations. But I would imagine the group projects, I'm going to share my screen and you're going to put something up to have us follow it. I would imagine that would be true for all of the presentations. All right. So using that assumption, what would also be helpful to me is that it would be great if you would be able to send me your presentation afterwards. Okay. So you would send me the PowerPoints, and also you would include as a separate document just a one-pager listing who was in your group and a little paragraph about how they participated, what labor they contributed to the project, and to be as specific and detailed as possible. Okay, so that's what I would like.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
All right. So my question was, since the class is now in a point system, I was just wondering how many points is the group presentation?
Yeah, the group presentation is going to be about 20 points. I'm gonna average it out. In other words, the whole course will be worth 100 points total. And what I'm going to do, and I shared this with you all last week, the week before, is that given the fact that we changed the modality for the course midway through, midstream, one of the things that I don't want to have happen is have any of you in any way disadvantaged regarding your final course grade. This is not to say that I'm going to throw my analysis and my assessment of your work out the window. But what I am going to do is I'm going to simply have you do all the work that's due for the class. I'm going to get all the those points collected. So everyone's going to get a total points that you've received throughout the class. And then I'm going to go down. I'm going to tell you how I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a statistical analysis. I'm actually going to go down and I'm going to do, statistics about who got what and just go down. So how many people scored 94 out of 100? How many scored 80? And I'll look at where the breaks are in the class. And as I told you before, 2 weeks ago, I'm going to be pretty liberal in my curve so no one really gets hurt. But I'm also going to hold you to some standards, of course. But I want to make sure that no one that there's the benefit of the doubt given what we've been through. Not only, quite frankly, having to pull up within a week and go online for this course, but also, let's face it, let's name it. I mean, the psychological trauma that's happened as a result of all this as well. So I want to tread a little easy, but I also want to hold us obviously to some standards. So that's kind of where I am with this. That's my methodology.
Thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
I had a question.
Yeah, Davina, go ahead.
So how are we choosing which groups go first?
You know what I did? I did it in the most scientific way you could imagine. I ended up simply going alphabetically. You'll note that Chinatown comes before Disneyland, and the Mission is the last. So I just simply did it just that way. I did the same thing with the second week's presentations. I really wanted to avoid that. Well, who wants to go first tonight? That way, from Jump Street, we all know 1, 2, 3. At the very end, Marianne will take us through her paper. That'll be the last part for 10 or 12 minutes at the end of all of that. I'm hoping we can take 5 minutes or even 7, 8 minutes in between presentations just to give us a little bit of a breathing room. And also to allow people to kind of set up and get situated when I share the screen with them. Okay, so that's how I did it. It wasn't nothing. It was really kind of arbitrary, but I decided that I would do that in such a way that would allow us just to go right through these without kind of going through, well, who wants to go next? Who wants to go first? And we'll just move through this. So that's how I chose it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, you're welcome, Davina. Robert, did you have a question?
Yeah. So, will the final be like the midterm?
The final will be like the midterm. It may not even be 40 questions. It may be 30 or so. I just don't know yet because I have not sat down to really map the exam quite yet. But it will be, in terms of the structure of the exam, it'll be exactly the same.
Right. All right. Well, that's it. That's all my question.
Sounds good to me. Anyone else have any comments, questions, or concerns about anything I've said? Anything at all?
Nope.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So let's kind of move on. So I guess the theme for the discussion tonight, if we could take a little bit of 30, 35 minutes to talk about this, is really California history as we know it has been both a blessing in many ways. It's been very much heralded as the the golden, of course, named the Golden State. It's been, heralded as being at one point the 5th largest economy of the world. It was famous because of the gold rush. It has all of these feathers in its proverbial cap. And what I'd like to do is to offer a more kind of sober and less congratulatory history of California, but look at it kind of through a balanced lens. And so I think the theme of the discussion is, while California has had a very great history in many, many ways, it's also had a history that's been riddled with all kinds of difficulties and injustices and problems. And so I think that it's really interesting way of kind of beginning to provide a summary of the course by talking about kind of the high points and the lower points in California history. And this is a way, it's just as if I had you write, you all worked on that very nice project as the class began, or about 4 weeks or 5 weeks into the class, I had you do a timeline and to write captions next to the timeline. And, it's really important, I think, and not enough of this gets done in classes, is that, in a way, this evening is a way of kind of punctuating the class by really looking at what we've learned in our reading, in the lectures, through the films, through each other's discussions and projects, and really kind of looked very critically at the history of California and really identified the very proud points in the state's history, as well as the not so good points of the history of California. And I was wondering if I could just kind of start us off and, and then maybe engage you, if we can, in some kind of a discussion. I know it's difficult with 28 people have joined us, so I'm very pleased about that. What would I say? I mean, I think that, the beginning of the history of the state, there was obviously the Native Americans, and they, as we know, they lived very peaceably in California, over 140 different dialects, 134 to 140 different dialects. And they were, of course, a pre-literate culture, so there was a lot done by oral tradition. And we know immediately that that they were very sophisticated. California Indians were very sophisticated, from the Ohlone to the Yahis to the many tribes that were throughout California. And we know that that was really kind of a proud part of our history in terms of the diversity of language and diversity of practices in the state of California, with all of the different Native Californians. And then, of course, as the history goes, that the Spanish colonized California. And that's where the story doesn't get so golden. That even though we were taught in the 4th grade that, it was kind of romanticized, we know, as we discussed, that, for example, with the development of the missions with Father Universera and his other padres, such as Father Lassawan and Font, etc., and Crespi, ended up really not being too terribly hospitable to the California Indians. And there's a lot of evidence that Indians, in fact, were not treated with a lot of respect, despite the fact that the Spanish missionaries were trying to Catholicize them, because they believed in their heart of hearts that the Indians needed to be civilized. And the way about doing that was to introduce Catholicism. And we know what happened there. The story's pretty clear. Lots have been written about it. We can't romanticize it. We can't cover our eyes. It wasn't a rosy picture. And then we have, the Mexicans coming in, the Mexican period after the Spanish. You know about all of that. And we then have the Bear Flag Revolt, and we have the Americanization that happens after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and then we have the kind of attendant racism that went on with that, and then we've got kind of the so-called, in quotation marks, the Americanization of California, and it being, and then we have the gold rush, which was a glorious, absolutely glorious world event. It was glorious in some ways, but as you know, some of the byproducts of the gold rush were horrendous. I mean, think about the foreign miners tax as an example. How, in fact, it was pretty much reserved for white folks, and anyone who was not white was discriminated against. With $20 a month, they'd have to pay foreign miners tax, and then how in the various shenanigans that were pulled by not having the Indians, that's another topic, but by not having by having the miners pay a tax yet to work through fields that already been picked through. You know that story. I've told it. I'm repeating myself, but I'm just trying to put the picture together. We know that in the 1840s, we know the concept of manifest destiny was, although seemingly a glorious topic, it was basically, and one of you said it perfectly well about 9 weeks ago, that manifest destiny was, in fact, the God-given right, or the belief in the God-given right, to move westward, damn all the consequences. So if you run over people, if you kill 1 million bison or buffalo, tough. That's part of the price of moving west. Yet again, the gold rush is heralded as a great world event. And you could say it actually was, but some of the byproducts were really less than. And so I think part of this discussion is really about complicating California history, of complicating it in the sense that, yeah, there were these glorious historical events. Yes, there were these great historical figures. But if we really look more deeply, and if we look at the multi-layered process of all of this, we can also see how, in fact, California has had, really, like most states, a mixed history in terms of, I hate to put it in a binary, but in a good and a bad way. And nothing's either good or bad necessarily, but I think you know what I'm getting at. And that is the complicatedness of the history of this state. And we can go on and on and on. You know, San Francisco, the glorious city. Well, yeah, and San Francisco was also the city that passed the Cubic Air Ordinance, as you'll recall, where basically Chinese were discriminated against. We know that California and the United States and San Francisco as well was not a sanctuary city at that time. And as a matter of fact, bought whole hog into the 1882 Chinese Exclusion Act. So we know that. And how discriminatory that was, even though, as you know, 15,000 Chinese were hired and essentially indentured servants to the big four in California history: Stanford, Huntington, Hopkins, right? Stanford, Hopkins, Huntington, and Crocker. And it was, remember, they were called Crocker's pets. Yet they built the Transcontinental Railway, 15,000 Chinese. And what? And then many of them ended up back in Chinatown in San Francisco. But there was, of course, that was done in 1869. And in 1882, here we have that Chinese Exclusion Act. So I think this is the kind of discussion that I want to kind of engage in. I don't want this to be a monologue. I'd like it to be a discussion somehow. But I'd like to invite you to think about, as you think about the major events that you've read about in the textbook, that you've heard about from me, that you've heard commented upon by your colleagues, what would you say? What other events I don't want this to be a downer, but I want it to be a very mixed, critical analysis of California history. So what would you say? So I've kind of started us off. The Gold Rush is a great example of an event that was heralded as one of the most significant historical events in modern history. And yet the byproducts of that were, both for people and for the environment, were horrendous, right? So for people, think about the racism that occurred in the gold rush, right? Think about the harshness of the conditions for people in general, as exemplified by Dame Shirley's letters, right? And then you also know about the horrendous environmental impact of hydraulic mining, okay, that went on from the late 1850s and wasn't outlawed until 1883. And this scarred the earth. This was, in fact, as one of my colleagues, Phil Dreyfus, who wrote a book on the history of environmentalism in California, says that it was the first environmental disaster in California history, is when the hydraulic mining happened, where those hoses, that water, literally mowed down and scarred the earth. So again, complicated history. And that's the way I like my students to think about history, is not good or bad, evil or good, but in a very kind of complicated, nuanced way. So now I'm going to ask you, what are some other events that you've learned about in this course that kind of demand that same kind of critical analysis? What would you say? How would you talk about that? And I think together, this can be kind of a mosaic that we can put together to look at the various historical phenomena and historical characters and kind of put them in context and make them complicated. So I'm going to kind of stop with the mind monologue and ask you what your thoughts are along these lines.
I think it's interesting because most people see San Francisco as a very liberal place and they don't really think about the history too much because right now, currently, it is where it is. But I think with the deeper analysis of it, like you were saying, you can really see, like, San Francisco wasn't always like this. It came up from a place where it was oppressing a lot of people at one point and was racist. So I just think it's interesting seeing how San Francisco came a long way from where it was initially during the whole what was I gonna say? The gold mining era? I don't know how to name it.
Gold rush?
Yeah, gold rush. There you go. Sorry, couldn't think of it. The gold era and everything like that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's use that. Thank you so much for that, and Paula. And so how could we take that and now give examples of that? So if we say that San Francisco has come a very long way since the gold rush, and if we look at the example, if we look at it through the lens of racism, what does that look like? Yeah, the Barbary Coast was named, of course, after the Barbary Coast in Africa. And the Barbary Coast in San Francisco, and by the way, just to give a footnote to what Nestor just said, as you walk downtown near the Embarcadero and through parts of North Beach, et cetera, you can see these gold medallions that are in the cement that say Barbary Coast on them. And there's a whole trail that you can walk, or many blocks. And that is the area of San Francisco to which Nestor is referring. And it was a very rough part of San Francisco. As a matter of fact, at one point, police officers didn't even like to go into that area because it was that tough. And so you're right. There was, for example, the Chinese were treated in a bad way. The prostitutes were treated in many ways and not a good way. And people were shanghaied out of the bars on the Barbary Coast, which means that they got drunk and were doped up and then sent on a ship and then shipped out. And literally they were gone for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, maybe even 6 months on a ship to basically do slave labor. And then they came back, and believe it or not, some of them didn't learn their lesson. Not to blame the victim here, but actually ended up being shanghaied multiple times. It became almost a lifestyle. So who knows about that? But yeah, there's that whole Barbary Coast history in San Francisco that's a rough and tumble kind of frontier Western town that police officers didn't even like to kind of go into. So yeah, and there was a lot of sexism and racism connected with that part of town. Yes.
So what I think learned from the class, I find something is really interesting is that during the gold rush era, even in Suzhou, a lot of time is the politician, when things happen, a lot of time the politician will target the minority first, say, you know, they break the law, they start being discriminated, and then kind of like drift the attention of the major event, and then, you know, to cover whatever they were supposed to do.
Right. Yeah.
And
We can.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, because thing is, it happened quite often. You know, pretty much every single minority almost went through exactly the same treatment, but it was never learned. When things happen, they just go around and around and never stop. It's just like a technique that politicians use to kind of like a propaganda to drift the attention and pass on to the minority.
Yeah, and not all I could say about that. Many of you know I'm very, very interested in the history of public health, and I illustrated in a few lectures how, in fact, the history of public health gives us lots of illustrations about the way in which public health principles were used, not due to any scientific validity, but more or less to rationalize racism. You know, you think about the cubic air ordinance. I talked to you a couple of weeks ago about the bubonic plague and the fact that the Chinese were blamed for that. In some ways, things don't change a whole lot, unfortunately. I mean, just to kind of bring it up to date, look at the coronavirus, the COVID-19, and at least whose ever side you're on or not on or whatever you believe, but at least acknowledge the fact that there's discourse about the Chinese regarding that disease. And so, you know, and we also know the health inequities that go on also as a result of disease. We know about this. We've heard about it in the news. It's researchers have been researching this for years. It's nothing new. It's no less sad, but it's nothing new. So, yeah, you're absolutely right about that. You're right about that. Yes. So how about if we talk about like something that was actually, again, not that it's all bad or all good, but something that's an important historical event that, let's just say, gave a lot of currency to California, yet at the same time, if you look at what underlies it, there are problematic areas. What would a couple of examples of that be? Does that make sense? So I like to use the gold rush as an example of that. Are there any other examples in California history that are actually could make us technically quite proud of being part of the state on the one hand, but on the other hand, if you look down a little deeper and you look at the different facets of that historical phenomenon, what would you say are the problematic areas of that? I'd like us to identify maybe 2 or 3 historical phenomena in California history and kind of do that analysis. What would that be?
Go ahead.
Wait.
I'd like to add the Silicon Valley Revolution.
Okay.
And in terms of the situation that we're in right now, as much as it has brought about the conveniences of allowing people in this pandemic to connect, there is a very dark underside to it, one in which I really can't go into much detail or depth, but that there are those that are using this situation
Yeah.
for ulterior means.
Yeah. Okay, Brian, that's a good example, and I think I could flesh that out a little bit. I mean, one of the things that I would say, and I think that I'm in a good position to say it as a native San Franciscan and watching this whole thing unfold, is the fact that if you look at the Silicon Valley and the whole .com era, .com in San Francisco. What we knew about that is that it, of course, gave California great prominence, right? I mean, we hear the governor when he does his daily updates on COVID-19. Just the other day, he referred to, California being basically the bedrock of all the scientific tech developments, and now he had great hope that California's companies could help to resolve some of the issues regarding COVID-19. Okay. At the same time, any of us who've lived here and know what's gone on, we've all heard the fact that in the .com era of the 1990s, that all of a sudden we had a lot of money in this town. In fact, I would argue that San Francisco, as great as that was, so to speak, because it gave a lot of publicity to San Francisco and to the Silicon Valley, as Brian has said, at the same time, we know that not all that shines is glorious. Not all that shines is gold. So for example, and by the way, the other thing is the Silicon Valley is actually referred to as the third gold rush, but that's a whole other thing. It's actually literally referred to as a gold rush. But if we look at the tech companies coming in and the Silicon Valley, what has that done to house prices? What's that done to restaurant prices? What has that done to artists who lived in lofts in the Mission District in San Francisco? What has that done to the neighborhoods themselves? If we think of the Valencia Guerrero corridor in San Francisco, that's become completely gentrified. So we have a situation in which this is hailed as a great thing. My goodness, all of this technology. And here we are in California. This is part of our class. Yet at the same time, there have been some really serious implications for that technology. So that's a great example, Brian, actually, of the greatness on the one hand, but the drawbacks on the other. And so, and a lot of these companies, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school here. Well, I kind of am because we're not at Skyline, we're on Zoom, but I am speaking out of school in that sense. That was a joke. You should all be laughing. Anyway, good. Thank you. There was at least one person who laughed. There is hope. So basically, these companies have also, in my view, have rode roughshod over a lot of people. A lot of these private big corporations have actually been problematic, particularly along the lines of social justice as well. And they've lacked the kind of public policies, of course, that other companies and other institutions have in place. So that is a good example of, because we've often heard of the tech industry, and there, on the one hand, there's some pride with that. Innovation, we'll solve the problems, we'll have the fastest computers, we'll be able to do this, do that. There's Facebook and there's Twitter and all of these companies, and again, I'm repeating myself, but boy, the housing prices have driven up. And really, I would actually argue, as others have, that San Francisco was once pretty much of a blue-collar, working-class town where families flourished. And it became increasingly not that. It became increasingly a city to house a bunch of rich people. And it's displaced a number of communities who otherwise would have remained here. But neighborhoods have been gentrified, rents have gone through the roof. I hardly need to tell all of you that. and it's been problematic. Yet it's the tech industry, and it's hailed as, wow, this is great. We've got a lot of good tech going on. So thank you, Brian, for that example. It's a good example of how something can be, on the face of it, great, wonderful, yet problematic. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So what's another historical, what would you say? We have just about 10 minutes left, and I really would like to use our time as valuably as we can. So think about California history. So we've got the gold rush, we've got Silicon Valley. What other things that you know of happened in California that could be seen as a really prominent thing or a prominent event, but has been problematic? If you can't think of anything, I can think of a few more.
Maybe the LGBT in the Castro.
Okay, say more about that.
Well, I mean, everybody kind of looked down on them, and then like eventually it became normal to SF, and I feel like it kind of spread throughout the US, and it kind of made it normal, but yet people still have problems with it in a way.
Okay, so it's been an evolution.
Yeah.
Of LGBT. Yeah. Yeah. And as a matter of fact, San Francisco actually, I believe I'm right in saying this, that Harvey Milk, the San Francisco supervisor, was one of the first openly gay individuals who was elected to public office. I think that is right.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's an example. An example is the Castro district, and for the gay men, particularly back in the day. And then it was the Valencia Gardens down on Valencia Street for lesbians. And we think of 1970 being the first open, pride parade. And then we, like I said, there were some social, if you go back to 1966, there was the Compton cafeteria riots. And if any of you want to see a really good documentary on that, I believe it's on YouTube, and it's called The Screaming Queens. And it's actually produced by Susan Stryker, who's a professor of gender studies, I believe at University of Arizona now. I think that's where she is. And so, yeah, you're right about that. There has been progress along those lines in San Francisco. And then, of course, there was some social progress happening, and then HIV/AIDS happened, and then we took a couple steps back and kind of moving forward again. And so it's been kind of an uneven history, but most of history and historical progress is uneven. It's like a stock market chart. It goes up and down, but hopefully towards the positive. The trend is upward. So yeah, I would say that that's actually true. So I think with the LGBT movement, that could be very true. And as a matter of fact, even though San Francisco is very kind of LGBT friendly, San Francisco is not without its problems with regard to social and sexual justice. Now, there's still a lot more that needs to happen with that. We're not done there yet. We still have a lot of work. We have a lot of work to do in general in social justice. So that's a good one. Another one I was thinking about is we haven't talked a lot about this in this class, and I certainly think it needs to be talked about, but is the Central Valley. Every time you prepare a salad, they now talk about the chain, the food, the production line. Or the
food supply chain?
Yeah, the supply chain, exactly. Where's that food coming from? It's coming from the Central Valley, most of it, right? It's the Central Valley is one of the most fertile areas of the earth. Really, it is. That's another thing we can claim fame to, is that it is some fertile land. The Central Valley is where some serious vegetables and fruits come from, and nuts and everything else. I mean, it's really something. Well, who do you think is working those fields? Why did Cesar Chavez have such a fit? Why was he why is it that Cesar Chavez had to be such an advocate, particularly for farm workers? Because why? Because it was problematic. There was a lot of racism. Yet, my goodness, if you think about California's, the San Joaquin Valley and the Fresno County or the San Joaquin Valley, the whole central California is world famous. Here we are again. We can brag about an aspect of California, but there's an underbelly to it. It's an underbelly to it. How are those people treated? How are those people treated right now? And I know that isn't a great example because we know who's at the top of the federal government, but think about how people are treated at that level. Yet a lot of people, when they make their salads and cut up their tomatoes and chop their cucumbers, don't really think about where that food originated and how it got into those crates, onto that truck, to that store. But, that's something that also needs continuous work.
Just want to add, Dr. Elia.
Yes, sir.
To that, in terms of not only the Central Valley, in terms of, especially when it comes to people's salads, there are two other major contributing regions in California, the Salinas and Imperial Valleys.
Oh, of course. Absolutely.
Alternate during the growing seasons, so that the rest of the country can have an adequate supply of salad, leafy green, particularly for salads around the country. So it's something to where, what I also wanted to bring up earlier is California is the third largest state. And that as much as the economic powerhouses that the major metropolitan areas bring to the state, even the rural areas of the state contribute vastly to the economic powerhouse, as well as to the cultural makeup of this state. So,
yes,
it is something in which people have to understand, especially in this type of situation. There are others in California who are also having it much very difficult time because of the resources in their area have already been not as beneficial or available on the level at least the city areas have access to. So that's something to where even in terms of the inequality throughout the state and the counties that exist within the state, it's something in which even those who live in the city also need to understand there are fellow Californians, other parts of the state that are having it pretty rough as well.
Yeah, having it pretty rough, and also, as you say, contribute vastly to not only the state, but I believe a lot of those vegetables and fruits and nuts, etc., are also transported across state lines. So they're also very helpful to other states. Yeah. So, and Christine, you're on mute. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Sorry, I forgot I was muted.
That's all right.
This is like totally separate from the agriculture thing, but I don't know if this statistic is 100% true, but I have been told that San Francisco has the highest rate of human trafficking of any city in the country. And I mean, since you're talking about underbellies, I thought that was really interesting considering the juxtaposition with us being, I mean, I used to live in LA, and like labor laws over there versus here is even in the same state are like radically different. And San Francisco is considered like a champion for labor rights, but I feel like sometimes it's just all appearances.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't know that statistic. I do know that there is a whole aspect of the San Francisco Police Department that is really it's a trafficking unit. So they're looking at trafficking and how people get human traffic, and the trafficking that goes on. I know there's a huge concern. I did not realize that the statistics were that high, that it was one of the highest around. So that would be an underbelly. Yes. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would agree on that.
That's good. It's bad. It's good that you're agreeing. I think that's right. But boy, it's sure a horrific human problem. It's just a really big problem. So any other words of wisdom about this, about events in California history? I think I'm satisfied with the fact that we came up with 3 or 4, maybe 5, and really kind of looked at how they are complicated. And I think that's really good. I think that's good historical analysis. I think it's good social analysis. I think it's really, really good. And so I want you, please, to keep thinking along those lines as you're reading, as you're watching films. And this film tonight, in some ways, will play into, it'll kind of advance our conversation a little bit, because it really does talk about how California is in fact a great state, but look at this and look at that. And I think it'll be complementary to our discussion tonight. So I look forward to not only having you watch that film, which by the way is about 17 minutes plus some seconds, but also I really look forward to reading your critical analysis of the film that you will find on Canvas, that is due Friday night at 11:59 p.m. Not 12 midnight, but 11:59. So please do that, and also be looking out for the final little written assignment, which is really a way of you reflecting on the class and on the major events, and having an opportunity to discuss those a little bit in a brief. Again, all of these are brief writing assignments, and then we'll be back next week for our presentations, and then in 2 weeks after that, we will have our final quiz. And by next week, I will be able to kind of really give you a good sense about the quiz, because I don't want you too stressed out and nervous about that. Okay. So are there any last minute questions or comments or anything I can do to clarify what we talked about? Anything at all?
No, I think we're pretty good on my end.
Okay. Anyone else?
I think I'm good too.
You go. Oh boy, 2 people are good. 2 out of 26. We're in good shape.
Okay.
Oh my goodness! All the thumbs are going up.
I'm okay.
Good.
Yeah.
All right, that's good.
Ellen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Me?
Yes, Robert, please.
All right. So, when I'm writing my essay, because I'm writing my essay right now from the Donner Party,
Okay. Yes.
and how am I going to present it?
What I will do for you and Marianne, and for you and Marianne, and for Chen, I'm going to actually send you an email about a little format that I think would be helpful. And it'll be really helpful. It'll have 3 or 4 points. I only expect you to spend 10, 12 minutes on it. But I promise to get back to you with a little email that'll be very, very easily understood and digestible. Okay?
All right.
And if any of you need me between now and next week, please call me. Or email me, and I'll call you back. Anything you need, I'm very happy to talk with you. So I'm very, very happy to clarify anything or to calm your nerves or whatever it takes. So that'd be great. So, okay. So let me not spend any more time on the Zoom right now. We're zoomed out. Glad we have not been Zoom bombed. So here's the deal. The deal is that on the canvas there is there's a video where it's embedded into the canvas. If that somehow doesn't work, it should work where you can get onto the film. I've also, as you know, emailed you the link. So I think between both of those, you're going to be in good shape. And again, please do the writing assignment on the canvas itself. That'll be great. I'm going to get busy grading the other two assignments. I've looked them over a little bit, and I'll get those. You'll have those scores. Most of you have done quite fine on those, by the way. So keep going. Last but not least, again, I'll remind you that only 21 people did the post or the brief writing assignment on the bubonic plague. 21 out of 30. Whoops, that's almost a full third of the class did not do it. Please don't do that. I would like to see 100% participation in this next little writing assignment. Okay, please. All right, so for the greater good, why don't we end the meeting? Does anyone want to talk with me this evening at all? I'm also available this evening. If any of you want to talk with me, I'm happy to talk. I'll assume not. Okay. Have a great night, and please get yourselves over to Canvas.
Bye, guys.
Good night, Doctor.
Take care of yourself. Thank you for the good conversation.